Hey guys, what is up? It's Umbruhh here, and today I thought about doing a fun little video for you guys. So today I'm going to discuss what would be the best city to live in Final Fantasy XIV, theoretically. So today I'm going to be discussing the city-states only, so I'm not going to be talking about Revenant's Toll, Doma, or Idleshire, or Rhalgr's Reach. So I'm going to be discussing primary cities today, like Limsa Lominsa, Ul'dah, Gridania, Ishgard, Mhigo, and Kugane. So, without further ado, let's go. So, in the lands of Eorzea, there are many places to live in, whether or not you are an adventurer, you want to be a warrior defending your country or city-state, or just an average citizen trying to make a guild peace. So today I'm going to be discussing what would be the best city to live in as a citizen, as well as talking about the specific pros and cons of living in that city theoretically. Theoretically, I mean, in IRL you can't actually live in those cities because they're non-existent. But without further ado, let's go. So first off, I'm going to start off with Ul'dah because it was a primary city point in a Realm Reborn storyline where everywhere you go, things would usually happen in Ul'dah. So, and it was the city where I started out in the game, so it holds a special place in my heart. So, let's discuss. Now, Ul'dah is a city-state located within Thanalan, which is a desert-like area that's hot, dry, but when you go to Ul'dah, it's a magnificent place. It's primarily based off of Middle Eastern culture in the real world, so, like, they have sultans, sultanas, they, like, the clothing that you see Ul'dah citizens or officials wears are similar to that of, like, Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia or any type of Middle Eastern country in the older times. So, as you can tell, it's a very hot place. So, first off, Ul'dah, as it is a really rich province, there are a lot of poor citizens within Ul'dah. So, I'm gonna start out with the cons. Poverty is a very real thing in Ul'dah, where usually refugees from places like Gridania or Ul'dah, when in one of the A Realm Reborn story patches, we tried to help a home for the Doman refugees. Now, there is a lot of refugees in Ul'dah, one of which is Raban, the leader of the Immortal Flames, who was a refugee from Gridania, specifically after the Alamegan crisis with the Garlean Empire. So, and poverty is a real thing. Like, children starve, many people starve in the streets, but while the rich eat and feast. So, as you can see, it's a very poverty-plagued place. However, there is a lot of rich people there, which means you could also, let's say you were really poor in the streets of Ul'dah. You've been poor all of your life, never had enough to eat, never had enough money to spend. But for those who are able to get lucky, they can become a monarchist and turn their lives around. Like, it reminds me of the city in Game of Thrones Braavos, where a man can start as nothing and become the most powerful man in that city. So, overall, for the pros and cons of Ul'dah, the pros would be, you will have an easy time there if you're rich. You will have a lot of power as a monarchist. But the cons would be the hot weather, and it is very easy to be poor in Ul'dah, and poverty plagues the streets. Another thing I forgot to mention about Ul'dah is that there's a great deal of corruption within the government force of Ul'dah. While Raban and Sultana Nanamo Ul'Namo aren't corrupt individuals, there are some other corrupt monarchists that have great power over the city, such as Tileji Adeleji and Lodorito. While they are very corrupt, it could lead to some unfair things happen to good people in the city. So for the next city-state, I'm going to be talking about the thylacracy known as Limsa Lominsa. So this city is run by the Maelstrom Grand Company, who is led by Merylweeb, who is a female Rogadin who used to be a pirate herself. Now this is a primarily marine-based city. It's located near water. I think the whole city's built on water. So it would be a place to thrive if you were a fisherman or a sailor. But, however, there is a great deal of crime happening in Limsa Lominsa, so unless you were strong and you knew the right people, I'd try to stay close to them because there's a great deal of piracy and thieves and criminals, basically all types of criminals, cutthroats, pirates, you name them. I mean, there are some vigilantes in that city that combat crime, and the Maelstroms and the Yellow Jackets stop the crime too. There's even a guild called the Rogues Guild that fight crime with crime, I guess. So, what I can say for this city is the pros and cons with it is it's a great place to live if you were a fisherman or a sailor, if you thrive in the marine state. This wouldn't exactly be the best city-state to live in if you wanted to live in a city-state free of crime, because there's a great deal of piracy and thieving throughout the area, and it's not necessarily the safest place to be unless you knew the right people. So next off, I'm going to be talking about the city in the trees, or the forest, known as Gridania. Now, Gridania is a very peaceful place, I would say. A nice, beautiful city, nice and quiet, hidden within the woods. But is it so peaceful? Because knowing their past, it's not the perfect city. Now, first off, I want to say I'm not a huge fan of Gridania myself, but I'm not going to have a biased opinion of this. So, Gridania is an area surrounded by beautiful, lush green forests. So, botanists, carpenters, and any type of lumberjacks, or whatever you want to call it, they would thrive here. Like as in Limsa Lominsa, you would thrive being a fisherman, because you had more resources available. And it's a peaceful city to live into, with a huge belief for elementals within the forest. But one thing about the city is their dark past. Now, the city was extremely prejudiced against the Dusk White Elezen and the Keepers of the Moon Mhigo, so there was a great deal of racism and xenophobia in this city. I mean, they stopped hunting Dusk Whites and Keepers of the Moon, and they're on more friendlier terms, but there's a great deal of mistrust between these races in the city. And as you can expect, it's a city surrounded by forests, so there would be a lot of bugs, I guess you could say. So in total, Gridania would be a good place if you wanted a peaceful, quiet city with a government that is rather pacifist, and if you wanted to make a living as a botanist, carpenter, and lumberjack, so on. But not the great city if you were a Dusk Whites or Keepers of the Moon, because, again, there's still racism. Next off, I'm going to be talking about the theocracy known as Ishgard, which was one of the city-states introduced in Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward. Now, this part has spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward, so if you haven't played this far yet, I would recommend not listening to this part. But if you want to listen to it, if you want to know about what it's like to live in Ishgard, regardless of spoilers, then please listen. Now, so Ishgard is located within the lands of Kurthus, just as how Ul'dah is in Thanalan, Limsa Lominsa is in Lanasia, and Gridania is in the Black Shroud. So Ishgard is a theocracy, meaning that their government has high religious values and they rule in the name of God. Or their god. Their god in this case is Halone the Fury. So there's a high presence of religion in this city. They praise Halone the Fury or Halone the Fury, and it is a shitty place to live if I'm being completely honest, but there are some good aspects to it as well. Although in Kurthus it used to be kind of similar to the Scottish Highlands, nice green hills, but then the 7th Umbruhh era happened and Bahamut happened in the Battle of Cartano, changing Kurthus into an everlasting winter, so it's cold and it's freezing. But if you were born into one of the high houses of Ishgard, you might have a good life there. So you would have power, you would have a voice, and unless you like the architecture and the theme of Ishgard, I honestly wouldn't recommend living there. So the pros of Ishgard was, unless you devoutly follow Halone, it would be a good place, and unless you were like born into one of the high houses of Ishgard, otherwise it would not be a good place to live because the government is highly oppressive. Before Aymeric reformed Ishgard, it was heavily religious, and anybody who didn't have these beliefs were labeled as a heretic and were either killed or kept prisoner. One of these characters in the story, specifically the Dark Knight side story, is Riel, who had a father who was somehow connected to the Dravanians. So he was labeled a heretic, and so was Riel. So she was locked away until Sejurju and Frey, two Dark Knights, saved her. So the government is highly oppressive, until Aymeric reformed Ishgard, with a heavy religious focus. Plus, it's a very cold, freezing city, so unless you didn't have shelter or fire, you would probably freeze to death out there, especially if you're homeless. Now, that's all I can say for Ishgard. As it's probably one of my favorite cities in the game, I wouldn't want to live there, to be honest. So, next off, I'm talking about Mhigo. More specifically, before Mhigo was taken back by the Alamegan resistance in Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood. So, what I want to talk about first of all for Mhigo is it's still a recovering city since the resistance has taken back from the Garleans. It's still rebuilding. It's located in Gridania in the Locks. I can't really say much for the city because we don't really know much has happened, but I can only recommend living in this city if you lived in Gridania before and you had your homelands retaken. So I'm sorry this was kind of short, but I can't really say much for Mhigo right now. So finally, I want to talk about one of the newest cities, the only city on this list that isn't located in Eorzea, and I am talking about Kugane, which is a city located in Hingashi, which is a land located right off the coast of Ul'dah, where Doma is located. So, as for Kugane, it's similar to Ul'dah, but kind of with a Japanese-like focus. Like, it's heavily inspired by the culture of Japanese in the real world. So, it's pretty similar to Ul'dah in a sense, but I guess less oppressive. There's still a corrupt government located in Kugane, and there is an imperial presence, unlike the other cities I've mentioned besides Mhigo. So, I guess for this city, I would have the same reasons as Ul'dah. Although one of the cons of living in the city, if you're in Eorzea, you might have some difficulty adjusting to the cultures and customs of Kugane, which is a long ways away from Eorzea, so you might have trouble fitting in and making some money over there. So that's all I have to talk about for what it's like to live in these cities in Final Fantasy XIV. Personally, I would like to live in Limsa Lominsa the most, just because it's a beautiful city surrounded by water, and I love swimming. Alright, so that's all for this video. Let me know, guys, in the comments what city you would like to live in, and I hope you all have a great day. Anyways, guys, I'll see you guys later. Have an amazing day. You guys are awesome. Subscribe for more Final Fantasy XIV content, and Umbruhh out.